If you stay awake for 22 hours to prep for a massive morning meeting, your cognitive impairment is identical to showing up legally drunk. It is terrifying when you think about it, yet modern corporate culture constantly praises the all-nighter as a badge of honor. We often treat human biology like a smartphone battery, where you just run it down to 1% and expect a magic reboot. This illusion that time spent unconscious is just lost productivity couldn't be further from the truth. In reality, sleep is an aggressive, high-stakes metabolic shift. Whether you are an entrepreneur recovering from a sprint or an executive seeking a cognitive edge, sleep is your essential architecture. The data from the Mayo Clinic and the NHS is overwhelming. You simply cannot cheat the biological system you inhabit. High performers don't view sleep as lost time, they view it as high-yield investment time for their future output. To optimize that investment, we have to understand how the brain actually knows it's time to transition to deep recovery. This relies on two systems. Sight-start. The first is chemical sleep pressure, driven by a powerful molecule called adenosine. Every second you are awake, your brain burns ATP for energy, and the byproduct of that consumption is adenosine. As it builds up all day, it latches onto specific receptors, creating a biological pressure that makes you feel increasingly tired. This perfectly explains why caffeine works. Caffeine doesn't actually give you energy, it's a molecular impostor. Its structure is similar enough to adenosine that it slots into those receptors and blocks them from signaling fatigue. It essentially masks the sleep pressure that is still quietly and dangerously building up in the background. The second system is your circadian rhythm, directed by a tiny cluster of cells called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. This is the master clock. It synchronizes your biology with the earth through a dance between cortisol and melatonin. A healthy system requires a massive cortisol spike in the early morning to mobilize glucose for the day ahead. As evening approaches, cortisol drops, and the SCN signals the pineal gland to start synthesizing melatonin. Melatonin is the biochemical signal that the day is over, prepping your nervous system for a deep repair cycle. However, the SCN is buried deep inside the brain and doesn't have a watch. To manage this handoff, it relies entirely on light. Special melanopsin receptors in your eyes detect light and send electrical signals straight to that master clock. Morning exposure to natural sunlight, heavily saturated in blue light, is the most crucial trigger to tell the brain to wake up. The problem is that we've hacked our environments by extending the sun into the midnight hours with our screens. When you stare at a screen at 10 o'clock p.m., you trick the SCN into believing it's high noon, causing it to halt melatonin production. You are chemically commanding your brain to stay alert right when its adenosine levels are begging it to shut down. But even if the lighting is perfect, many still find themselves tossing and turning. The master clock only sets the schedule, it doesn't drive the car. This brings us to your autonomic nervous system, which handles your heart rate through sympathetic and parasympathetic branches. The brain cannot differentiate between the threat of starvation and a passive-aggressive email at 11 o'clock p.m. It treats stress like a biological emergency, flooding the system with cortisol and blocking the parasympathetic brake. To manually force that biological brake, you have to target the vagus nerve, the superhighway of your parasympathetic system. The most effective tool is the 4-6 breathing technique. Inhale deeply for 4 seconds and exhale slowly for 6 seconds. Making the exhale longer causes your diaphragm to move against your heart space, triggering the vagus nerve to release acetylcholine. This forces the heart rate to slow down, signaling the brain that the environment is safe. Once you sleep, the body begins an aggressive physical flush via the glymphatic system. During deep sleep, glial cells shrink, causing gaps between brain cells to expand by 60%. This allows cerebrospinal fluid to rush in, sweeping away metabolic toxic waste. It removes proteins like amyloid beta and tau, misfolded proteins that form sticky plaques. If left behind, these plaques short-circuit synaptic connections, driving diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. If you don't enter deep, slow-wave sleep, those cellular pathways don't expand, and that toxic plaque remains lodged in your neural circuitry. This perfectly explains the heavy, toxic brain fog you feel after an all-nighter. The garbage is literally still sitting in the streets of your brain. Interestingly, research suggests that sleeping in a lateral position, on your side, may mechanically optimize the flow of this fluid. As the night progresses, you cycle into REM sleep. If deep sleep is the hardware repair, REM is the software repair, handling emotional regulation and memory consolidation. If you consistently cut your sleep down to 5 hours, you are mostly amputating these crucial REM cycles that happen late in the morning. You are robbing yourself of emotional resilience and analytical capacity. According to the NHS, staying awake for 22 hours destroys your executive function so severely that you would actually fail a roadside sobriety test. You are operating at the legal alcohol limit, yet we completely normalize this level of cognitive degradation. The physical fallout is just as measurable. A Mayo Clinic study took healthy individuals and restricted them to 4 hours of sleep for 2 weeks. Sleep deprivation down-regulates leptin, the hormone that tells you you're full, and up-regulates ghrelin, the hunger hormone. The participants instantly began consuming over 300 extra calories a day, primarily hunting for dense fats and proteins. While their weight barely moved, CT scans revealed an internal disaster. Their visceral fat skyrocketed by 11%. Visceral fat is a dangerous endocrine organ that wraps around your intestines, secreting inflammatory cytokines and driving insulin resistance. Many try to justify this by catching up on weekends, but even 3 days of recovery sleep failed to reverse the fat accumulation. Sleep debt is not a financial overdraft you can easily zero out. It is a loan with exorbitant compounding interest paid in cognitive decline. To avoid this debt, high performers should adopt the 3-2-1 rule, a tactical blueprint recommended by experts. The 3 dictates no caffeine or large meals 3 hours before bed. Digestion generates metabolic heat, but to cross into deep sleep, your core temperature must drop by 2 to 3 degrees. A warm bath an hour before bed helps. It causes vasodilation, dumping heat so your core temperature plummets. The 2 in the rule is no work-related tasks 2 hours before bed. This is your parasympathetic runway for cognitive detachment, so the vagus nerve can apply the brakes. Finally, the 1 is no screens 1 hour before bed to protect your melatonin surge. Resistance training is superior to late-night cardio for treating insomnia and demanding deeper repair. Fermented foods support a healthy gut microbiome, which manufactures the serotonin needed for melatonin. Be wary of orthosomnia, an obsession with perfect data that causes the very anxiety you're trying to fix. Trust your subjective feedback, your mental clarity at 2 p.m., and your resilience. Sleep is the ultimate biological reset, where your brain washes toxins, files memories, and rebalances hormones. Quality sleep is a high-yield investment. Tonight, commit to the 3-2-1 rule. Put the screens away, practice the 4-6 breathing, and treat your biology with the respect it commands. Don't just run your battery to 1%, respect the repair cycle. Your future self will thank you for the investment.